I just wanted to tell you a little bit about him. It won't be too long or rambling, hopefully. So, mashallah, he's the 9th out of 10 children, so the second youngest. There's a debate about, back then they were allowed to change birth dates, so maybe he was 87, maybe he was 90, there's a debate. But, like many of that generation, they saw so many changes, families were separated, and anyway, so he was a bit of an adventurous one. Of those 10 children, he's the only one that left Pakistan, studied in Lebanon, went back, found a wife, you may know her, my mom, and then this duo, they decided, well, let's go on an adventure and move to Wales, randomly, Cardiff, Wales, where they were like pioneers. There were not many other Muslims or Pakistanis there at the time in '62. And that's where we were born, in Cardiff, my brother and I. And then I think, he got his accountant degree and maybe got bored and decided, well, Canada, that's available. So then moved to Toronto in '73. Now there's the Toronto that you guys know, which is, Mississauga and whatnot, but back then we were, I think, one of the earlier Muslim families. There was one masjid that was in downtown. There was a house. Sometimes we were dragged there for things. There was a place, Gerrard Street, which maybe some of you know. It was the only Desi place. It was one block. There was no Mississauga. There was none of this other stuff. There were some really long Indian movies that went on forever that were incredibly boring that we would get dragged to as well. But then Abba had a bit of a midlife crisis maybe, and he said, oh, I want to maybe have a business. And yeah, there's some nephews, and nieces. So in Boston was Rashid Bhai, Fatma Abba, Imran Bhai, who, if I say he was married to Imran Bhai Reno, but that Imran Bhai, and Khalid Bhai. So he decided, well, maybe I'll get into the restaurant business, having no restaurant experience. And so moved here in '84. And that's where he started, Ami Abba, started building these roots. And these roots have gotten deeper and deeper. And this community, it's meant a lot. And this masjid, you guys are really important to them. And so, he was a cool guy, and we didn't really appreciate that he was a cool guy, but when we'd go to Pakistan, the cousins, and mashallah, there's over 30 cousins, like, oh, he's a cool uncle, he used to like the cars and whatnot, and now we get all these messages, and from even yourselves, we hear stories, because maybe, so the restaurant thing didn't work out, so then he rebooted himself as a realtor, and then maybe that's where most of you know him. And so yeah, people talk about, oh yeah, he was so good, he helped us find a house and this, and so there's things that we learn about him that we as his kids didn't really always appreciate. So, but yeah, it's a loss, but as many of you know, the duo got broken up 4 years ago. Now he's back with his wife, inshallah. So, and he's the last of those 10 who passed. So now he can be with his brothers and sisters. And and mashallah, when we had Parkinson's, and he had this slow decline, and when he went, mashallah, he went peacefully. We were all there, and we were lucky. And we're awesome parents, and they were a combo, and now the combo, inshallah, is back together. So, thank you very much. And now, I think Alina wants to say a few words. I think I did okay. I don't need that. I'm good.
Amin's granddaughter, and it's a good speech. My name's Alina. If not, I'm Hannah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So his dad said Donna was super cool. To us, he was a really cool grandfather. I think one of the biggest and earliest memories we had of him was every morning when he would go on his walks, he'd stop at Cumberland Farms and get us all candy. Probably not something our parents loved, but his theory was that if he fed us a ton of candy when we were little, we would hate it when we grew up. It worked for some of us, most of us not so much. But he then also showed us his love of sugar by taking us to Bubbling Brooks, which I think some people here might know, and obviously Dunkin' Donuts constantly. My cousins still come from the UK, and I think the first thing they get is a donut from Dunkin' Donuts at the airport. And one of the stories that we've heard recently was when Dada went to the UK to visit my cousins, he had to go see a doctor. And when he saw this doctor, he said, "Oh, I'm just slightly diabetic." And the doctor was like, I mean, slightly diabetic is not a thing. You are diabetic or you're not. But in his eyes, there was always room for sugar, no matter what, even if he was slightly diabetic. And then Dad also talked about Dottie, and obviously I think all of us knew them as a great duo. They were like the original Life 360 before it was an app. They knew no matter what country their grandchildren were in, where they were, if they were home alone that night, and even if they were going somewhere, Dottie would be the one to call us, but we always knew Dada was sitting right next to her. And the minute she hung up on someone, he was like, call this person next. And they knew like, oh, Alina's alone in her apartment tonight. And then they'd call Shanaz and tell Shanaz that even though she's in London, Alina's alone in her apartment tonight. So our parents, I think, would know just to call Dada or Dottie and be like, hey, where are my kids right now? Because they would know, constantly. Some other things, like, I think if you knew my Dada, you'd know how generous he was. He opened his home to so many people. They both did. I remember growing up, I used to get really annoyed that people were always staying in our house. And I would always have to give up my bedroom, but that was just like part of who they were. And he also loved to make bets over silly things, and he would take the losing side. But the bet was always for dinner, because he just loved to take people out for dinner. So he'd always just, say, I bet you can't do this. And then someone would have to go eat out with him, because that's what he loved to do. And he was also always super well dressed. I don't think I ever saw my Dada in sweatpants until maybe like a year ago. He always wore slacks and a button-up shirt. Even I took him to the gym one day and he was doing the leg press in slacks and a button-up shirt. And even his pajamas were flown in from London, matching set of M&S pajamas. He always looked really sharp, and if we didn't and we were leaving the house, he'd be like, you gotta go change. And then to go along with being a cool grandfather, he was always super current. He was the first person I knew that had an iPhone, and I think he was the first 80-something-year-old I knew to have an Instagram. I'm not sure if he knew what to do with it. I'm not sure if he even understood what it was, but he made me get him one or sign up for him. And then more recently, we went to go visit my cousins in the UK, and Dada wanted to learn about crypto. So my cousin Shanaz's husband was in finance. And so he sat us all down in the living room, and he's like, Saad, I want you to tell me about crypto. And so I saw Saad Googling in the corner what crypto is and ETFs and how to explain it. And I start laughing, And I think that was the first time my dada has ever yelled at me and gotten mad at me because I was laughing. And he's like, you have to show so much respect for Saad. He's telling us something so important. Like we were at a TED Talk and not in the living room. Anyways, yeah, and so lastly, sorry, I'm not great at this. Lastly, I just want to say, as Dad said, you know, Dada Dadi, one was not the same without the other. They were such opposites, but they worked so well together. Hannah more recently said, in case I haven't outed myself that I'm not Hannah yet, how she came to visit one year and was sitting in the car with them. And if you knew my Dada, he loved to drive, and he loved to drive really fast. Step on it was one of his favorite things to say. But unfortunately, he lost his license at one point, so Dadi had to drive. And Hannah got really scared that our 80-year-old grandparents were going to get a divorce because they were fighting in the car about how fast Dadi should be driving. But even when they would fight, they were honestly great together. I think all of you know them as a duo and how welcoming and warm and generous they were. I mean, they lived here long before we ever lived here, and when we moved here, there was already such a great community. So yeah, thank you for coming, and that's all from me.